You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to look into horror films, dissecting them one screen legend and franchise at a time. Our podcast subject for this episode is dedicated to the last two Halloween franchise films, Halloween and Halloween 2, both directed by Rob Zombie. In order to successfully do this, we need a team of horror aficionados who will form the surgical team each episode. So let me introduce you. First up is yours truly, Paul Farrell. I'm the lead surgeon and host for this series of the podcast. And joining me each episode at the operating theatre of the Halloween franchise discussions is Chief Surgical Technician Ben Skinner.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. Oh, you always brought in the old kind of European flavour. And
yeah, I don't know. I just,
Just do.
I feel like I got to bring something.
And so you're here on board to literally get into the guts of the subject. So this is we recorded these Halloween franchise discussions a fair crack away now, and we were yet to kind of sit down, and I don't know if there's a little bit of us that was slightly putting off talking about the Rob Zombie ones because
it's just taken us this long to mentally prepare.
That's it. To kind of broach talking about these ones. But I've also should add too that you are kind of also working with soisitanygood.com and doing really, really well. So and so consequently this is going to be your last podcast discussions with the Surgeons of Horror team.
It's very sad, yes.
It's a sad times.
I mean, look, we're it's all child's play over there compared to what happens here in the horror genre.
Not in the horror genre, no, that's true.
But I have learnt quite a lot since doing these podcasts with you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks,
You've
man.
educated me.
Yeah.
I was a noob. I'm still very much a noob. But
I don't know if that's fair, man. You have a fair understanding of and a fair love of films, and so that knowledge you bring to that, and the passion you bring to not just the podcast, but everything you're doing over it.
I think it made me less of a snob because I was very much, I'd always watch the originals,
yes,
and then I wouldn't watch any of the horror sequels because they just, had such a bad reputation. But I think if you're going to be a completist, I think you've got to watch it all.
I think so, and this was the point with these Halloween franchise discussions that we're doing. So we're releasing these out in the week coming up to Halloween this year on the 2017. And we're going to kind of finish that, and it's kind of timely because next year, obviously, we know that the new Halloween film's coming out. So that'll be really interesting to see how that kicks off because apparently it's picking up at the end of Halloween 2.
Yeah, that's very
from the original films.
It's not going to be a comedy, even though people assume that because Danny McBride is involved.
Yeah, that's it.
I like this new
line of thinking.
Well, I also think it's good that they're kind of erasing, as we've talked about. Not much good happens after. Like 2 anyway, so
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There's some kind of little hit, and I reckon we'll get to the wrap up, looking at the franchise as a whole. But there are some kind of good nuggets in there. But solid films, debatable.
I think it's a logical place to pick up the timeline.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure,
I agree. The first of the 2 movies that were under review, Halloween, would be a reboot of the franchise with a reimagining by Rob Zombie, apparently approached by Bob Weinstein to make the movie. Choosing the same story element of the original movie with Michael Myers stalking Laurie Strode and her friends on Halloween night, Zombie would add a little of his own touch with a prequel of sorts, delving into the psyche of this much-loved killer. Despite garnering mainly negative reviews, the film grossed $18 million worldwide. So naturally a sequel would be in the offering. And it currently holds
18 million?
80 million.
Oh, I thought you said 18.
No, 80. 80.
Like,
no, it's good that you clarified that.
That is not that impressive.
No, 18. And it currently holds a 25% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, so it kind of gives you a gauge of...
Nothing to boast about?
No. And
although is that higher than Batman vs Superman?
Oh, we need to check that out.
Yeah, because that was
pretty abysmal.
Yeah.
And the sequel, Halloween 2, would be released 2 years later in 2009 and primarily focus on the connection between Laurie and Michael. The film, however, would fare less than its predecessor and only generate around $39 million in gross revenue to mainly negative reviews. And it currently holds a 19% review on Rotten Tomatoes.
I think that's closer to Batman vs Superman, actually. Yeah.
So I should add, actually, like I said this to you off record, that we're recording this the date we're recording this is the 31st of August, which is exactly 10 years ago to the day that the first Halloween movie came out.
Oh, no,
as in like the Rob Zombie one.
Oh,
not the original. Sorry.
Yeah.
The Rob Zombie one. Because
I'm
next year,
the timelines
next year going to the new Halloween film that's going to be released. That will be 40 years since the original came out. So it's good marketing.
That's good timing. Yeah.
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 Do you remember, we spoke about the 25 years later one,
yeah,
and how that kind of was a big marketing kind of push at the time, and it feels good to have a new one coming out. But
so what was the time that passed from 6 to Rob Zombie's Halloween?
So I want to say 6 came out in 1996.
Yeah,
and this came out in 2007.
So it was about the 10-year gap again.
Yeah. So it was a big chunk of time.
Yeah, long enough to,
forget about Halloween 6. Maybe.
Just long enough. And now we're coming back again and I think it's been long enough since Mr. Zombie.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because, we're stepping outside of the Halloween franchise for a moment. So we've seen Friday the 13th try and reinvent itself with 2 movies that came out. And then we've also seen A Nightmare on Elm Street try and reinvent itself. And they both failed. They never picked up that original zest that the original franchise movies had. There are some lovers out there for those movies, but so far the 80s slasher kind of icons have failed to live up to expectation.
That's right.
When they've been reinvented in the cinema world. But yeah, look. So I guess the key thing is we're going to look at these 2 movies, Halloween and Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie.
Yeah.
But the key thing is, what do we, the surgeons that are represented in the podcast, do we make of the 2 additions to this franchise? In order to do this, we need a review. So let's first up start dissecting these movies with, addressing the elephant in the room, also known as Rob Zombie. So I'm calling this next section the Rob Zombie factor.
It's quite mean. Does he have elephantitis or something? Or
he does. Well, yeah.
It's very sad.
We won't mention it to his face.
So can you...
So I'm going to give you a bit of backstory of Rob Zombie.
Yeah, please
first.
do. Please do.
Yeah. So up until making these movies, Zombie had been primarily known in the music scene with his band White Zombie, and ultimately his solo projects that followed after suit. So I think White Zombie kind of made 4 studio albums all up. And they had a decent following. People like Iggy Pop and even Kurt Cobain kind of praised them when they first kind of came onto the scene, but they equally had negative reviews thrown at them too. And I think that is the nail in the coffin in Rob Zombie. You either love him or hate him. He's Vegemite.
Nice word.
He's Vegemite. So it'll be interesting where we sit on the fence on this one too, but we'll come to that down the track. What is evident, though, is that he has a deep love for the horror movie genre, and this was evident in his work, even then citing inspiration from Bela Lugosi and the Frankenstein tale, and his drive and passion would lead him to the director's chair, where he would make his debut film House of a Thousand Corpses, a movie that struggled to find a distributor and got mainly negative reviews upon release because of its grotesque nature and violence that was embedded throughout, and would become pretty much a signature kind of thing for Zombie. And his movies.
Was it completely self-financed in the end, or is it?
I don't know if it was self-financed, but it was an independent film distributor that kind of picked it up and pushed it out into the world.
Did he direct his music videos previously? Or?
I wanted to look at that. I didn't get a chance to kind of look at that. I'm happy for Zombie fans to kind of let me know on that. It would be interesting to see at what point he went from
because it does seem like quite a step, director.
Recently watched House of a Thousand Corpses, and to try and get into the mindset of Zombie in the lead up to these movies, and you can kind of see he definitely had found a niche kind of area and a market shall I say, for a particular style of film that nobody else was doing at the time. And I think there are people that, like I said, either love him or hate him, and the lovers just rode with him all the way, and they kind of really love that kind of style and that voice. There's a lot of imagery and stuff that he plays with that feels like music video at times. You know, when you're watching that one, particularly his follow up, The Devil's Rejects, he starts using like, or I forget which they kind of blend into each other a little bit. But there was in one of them he starts using like the negative filter aspect to it, which is kind of a bit kind of
and he's a big fan of quick cutting between scenes.
Yeah, that's right. So with his film House of a Thousand Corpses, as I said, it kind of struggled a little bit to find its audience. Interestingly, though, it's reviewed by some in recent years as a modern classic, which is kind of, for me, is a bit of an interesting outcome for that. And it's established a cult in its own right as a result. And in 2005, as I said, Zombie would then release a direct sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses called The Devil's Rejects. And this one picked up a bit more of a positive response than its predecessor. Watching them, I struggle why a little bit. Like, to me, House of a Thousand Corpses is a massive nod to things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and, you know, that kind of, out in the sticks family that kind of
hillbilly horror kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas
a bit grungy
for
as
me,
well.
Devil's Rejects is more about a road trip kind of, they're criminals on the run kind of approach. So it kind of steps away from the horror element. And there's some aspects that I liked about A Thousand Corpses too. There's like this kind of underworld kind of satanic ritual thing going on, and there's like a labyrinth of, maze of disturbed shit going on underneath the main house, which is the kind of climax of the film. So there's some kind of nice touches in there, whereas I think for me Devil's Rejects steps away from that a little bit, personally. And then he would go on to make Halloween, which we're going to talk about, but just very quickly, he would then direct a further 3 features after Halloween, which would be Lords of Salem and 31 more recently, and sandwiched between those two and the last Halloween film was an animation film that he did, which was called something like The Haunted World of El Super Beasto. Well, I'll say that again: The Haunted World of El Super Beasto.
It's quite a title.
Yeah, it's.
I have not heard of that one.
It's an interesting viewing. It's based on a comic series that he had written, and it's everything you can imagine that comes out of Zombie's warped mind, kind of put into animation form.
It's funny. I for some reason I had the impression that like the second Halloween he did kind of killed off his film career. Like we hadn't heard of him since.
He's been
he's still kicking around.
Yeah, so like for me, like if we're talking like post Halloween with him, like the animation movie aside, Lords of Salem was I found that really hard to get into. I kind of came out of it going, because it was just a bit of a nothing film. It felt quite empty. There's moments of it where you feel like he's maturing a little bit.
Yeah. But
I'm not talking about Tarantino maturing Jackie Brown style. I'm talking about just mature for Zombie. Like it just wasn't quite there. And then with the last one, 31, which I watched fairly recently actually, like the other night, it feels like it's going back to where he began. It's almost like he's gone full circle a bit. And there's a lot of... And I know he's been criticised for this too, because there's a lot of retrade going on with House of a Thousand Corpses stuff creeping back.
You mean plot-wise?
Yeah. So you kind of question where he's going with that, if he was to venture back into horror terrain. Because
he said all he has to say, I don't know.
Because he's supposed to be...
These things do kind of happen in circles.
They do, yeah, that's right.
Come around in circles.
So he's meant to be... A rumour has it that he's making a third... movie for the House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects trilogy, which is a bit hard to understand, seeing as they all got killed off in the second one.
That doesn't matter, Paul.
So where timeline-wise, where that sits, I don't know. But he was also like, before that, I thought he was going to be making a Groucho Marx movie. There's a lot of stuff in his movies, even the House of a Thousand Corpses, particularly like all the characters in that are named after characters from the Marx Brothers movies. So he's definitely got a love for it, and that's something I've noticed. Like you can't deny that he does know his stuff when it comes to horror pop culture.
Yeah,
and you see that influenced a lot through his movies. And I guess that might be how he managed to sweet talk getting Halloween made under his banner.
I just don't. I think people just find it hard to accept him as a filmmaker in his own right.
Yeah. So, what's your thoughts on Zombie as a director, though? Like, where do you stand with him as with his? How much of those movies had you seen, and how familiar are you with his work?
So I've only seen the Halloweens. Mm-hmm. I think it's purely because I'm pretty influenced by reviews and word of mouth, and especially now, like I try not to like explore something unless it's meant to be good, or it's so bad it's good, because that's a whole other thing I can get into. But having seen these two films, and this is sort of like these are the films that happened halfway through his career.
Yeah,
like I am curious to go back and watch the first two, just to see whether they were like better or worse. But yeah, my impression is that there's just so much going on, like stylistically with these movies. Yeah, it's hard to really put a finger on what I don't know what the point is really. What point he's trying to make. I think that's the thing, and I guess we'll come to that when we get to the nitty gritty of the two movies. But like, it's weird now, having watched all of his canon of work, that to me I feel like this was the dip in the road for him, like Halloween, and even I would say I'm going to ignore the Haunted World of El Superbeasto, because it's just a different kettle of fish, and that might be it could have been his way of kind of letting loose a little bit, because you kind of see that it's just batshit crazy but kind of fun with it. And then I feel like he's still struggling on the with Lords of Salem. I think he's still trying to, like, there's something there, there's a grain of something going on. Yeah. And then, but for me, 31, even though it was a bit of a retread, I felt like that's him almost finding his voice again. So it'd be interesting to see if he does stick to the horror genre. Yeah. What the next one will bring, of how we can explore that. That to me would be interesting to see. Yeah. All right. Look. So let's look at Halloween, his first effort. In the franchise. It came out in 2007, as I said at the front of this. And I'm going to basically call this humanising Michael Myers, because this is essentially what people have argued for and against, in favour or against why they loved it or hated this movie. It's the big topic of conversation. This is the thing we're probably going to talk about quite a bit, and we've already talked about it on our previous Halloween podcast as well, Yeah, like not even just Halloween, like there seems to be like a growing trend, and even like Leatherface is about to come out in September, October time. Yep. So about probably the time this has come out to record, it may actually be available to some listeners out there. And this is an origin story of the character of Leatherface as well, of how he came to be. And we've seen it countless times done. Origin stories. They're all the rage right now. That's it. But do they work? I don't think they do. You're quite learned on the spectrum of films. Can you name me any film where they've gone to the origin story and it be successful? No. Well, successful, I guess, is two different ways you can define that. Well, even like, okay, enjoyable, even like, it's like, I've seen it a lot in horror films, and it's demystifying the mystique of why we come to love people like Michael Myers and Jason, And the moment you kind of give them backstory and start fleshing out that character, they become less menacing. And I've said this before, and particularly masked assailants. Yeah, I think more so. I think the horror genre is more like it's more so than any other genre as one where you shouldn't do an origin story. Yeah, because they need to be scary, and it's kind of like it's in the news this week that the Joker, they're making a Joker origin film. And I would have thought, him being a villain, it's never a good idea to go back and do an Anakin Skywalker with, like, the Joker. The whole reason why he's such a classic villain is because, like, the backstory is really confusing about what exactly his backstory is. Yeah, he's always making a new story up about, you want to know how I got these scars? Like, you never really know for sure whether he's telling the truth or not. Yeah. And it's better if it's just unspoken.
But I was thinking about, has it been done right? Has it been successful? And the only thing I can think of is possibly in the prologue of the last Indiana Jones film. Not King of the Crystal Skull.
River Phoenix?
I'm not counting that at all. Yeah, the River Phoenix prologue.
Yeah, that was
Last
good.
Crusade. I thought that handled it quite well.
You're right.
It
with
wasn't
the
the whole
scar
film.
on his chin moment with the whiplash.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
I mean, and let's forget that the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles exists.
Yeah, please.
Because that's just terrible.
Yeah. No, I get it.
But I thought that was well handled.
Yeah.
But he's a hero. I think when you're talking about villains.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think because as soon as you start doing that, you just kind of you just lose that. You don't. So even Hannibal Lecter, I think they haven't ever they done an origin one of that? I could be wrong. I have to look into that.
It's weird because there's also you could look at something like going back to DC Batman, the Harvey Dent. You get to see his arc from Harvey Dent to Two-Face, and that is compelling. But that's that's already part of the story.
Yes.
There was quite a lot of story in the comics and the cartoon. You actually spend a lot of time with Harvey Dent first, and it's kind of a tragic arc that he has, and the emotion of that. But when the backstory is invented later, I think that's when you come in.
I think so. I think that's it. So anyway, look, this is the point. We do pick up very similar to the original. We do pick up following a 10-year-old Michael Myers. And there's a point where you start seeing these signs of psychopathic tendencies that creep out, leading up to him kind of basically beating up the school bully. Am I right that he's the guy that's in Spy Kids as well? The kid that's in Spy Kids? I need to look that up.
Yeah, he looks familiar.
And then later in that evening, then he kind of murders his sister Judith, which is similar to the original one as well. He also kills his mother's boyfriend, who's played by William Forsythe, who becomes quite a bit of a regular player in Rob Zombie's films. And Judith's boyfriend, Steve, also kind of gets his comeuppance at the beginning of the film. Only his baby sister, Angel Myers, is spared. And after one of the longest trials in the state's history, Michael is found guilty of first-degree murder and sent to Smith's Grove Sanatorium under the care of child psychologist Dr. Samuel Loomis, played by Malcolm McDowell, who initially cooperates with him, and then over the following year, Michael becomes fixated on papier-mâché masks, closing himself off from everyone, even his mother, Deborah, played by Zombie's wife, Sherry Moon Zombie.
I thought it was the wife, yeah.
And who visits him regularly. When Michael then kills a nurse as Deborah is leaving from one of her visits, she can no longer handle the situation and commits suicide. So this is all I've basically spoken about half an hour of the setup of the film.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of time spent on this kind of building up who he was, and he's been keeping dead cats and
he wears a Kiss t-shirt.
Well, that's tragic enough.
It's the kind of thing I thought they would have covered it in an opening montage, maybe opening credits. Perhaps you show the deaths, and the opening credits is a montage of him in the asylum as time passes. And then the movie really starts at when he's grown up, Michael.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that's something that the original film, that would be a way to monetize the original film.
Yeah, because it does jump from the murder to...
There's a time jump, but there's not much in between. They could have done a kind of a cool... quick cut montage.
So the reason I wanted to... I did kind of gloss over it really quickly, but the reason I'm highlighting it is because, to me, this is the flaw of the movie. There's so much time spent on the reason why he's become who he is. And,
it's like two films in a way.
Yeah, it really feels that way.
Actually, I think it's longer than half an hour.
I think it is actually. It could even be close to an hour. Yeah. It's a really long kind of build
to
up.
The point where Michael actually escapes.
Yeah.
I think it's about an hour until we meet Laurie.
Yes, I agree. I think you're right.
So it's the halfway point.
And it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because we spend so much time talking about the villain in this case.
Yeah.
And classic horror traits, particularly in the slasher horror genre, is that we're focused more on the protagonist rather than the antagonist.
Yeah.
Because we then have to care for the people that is being chased down and killed.
Well, that's right.
You know.
But I guess it was him. That was that was the point of difference that he was going for.
Yeah.
At a time when you might have thought that was the trendy thing to do. It's like, oh wait, but I'm gonna fucking tell Michael Myers' story. And
which I can see how producers' eyes were lit up, going, "Yeah, it sounds fantastic. Let's do this," you know. But like,
you got a deal.
Yeah, bingo. But like, it's you know, it feels like there's so much time spent on this too, and even like, you know, the psychological sessions that, you know, Sam Loomis is going through with him and trying to reach through to him, and Myers goes further and further into his own shell to the point that he's hiding behind the mask. So it's kind of like why he has to kind of...
And he's got that room of masks as well. And there's even an origin story for the mask itself.
Yeah.
Until it lands on that particular mask.
That's right. So it's interesting. Like, for me, that I just felt like it... it's hard not being the snob with this, because I just was like... I found it really hard to get into the movie because of this backstory that we're presented with.
Yeah.
And it just feels like it deviates so... And it's hard because, like, I'm such a fan of the original film, like the original John Carpenter 1978 film. It's hard to then not be the snob with it and kind of try and look at it realistically with a new lens.
You can't, because there is so many callbacks, and the score is... Is this the same score? It sounds like it.
They use it, but then it changes. Yeah,
slightly. But there are the same cues. They use similar cues.
Go on. Sorry.
It just feels a little off when you do hear it, because it's from the right from the very off. You kind of hear it.
Yes.
And it doesn't have the pumpkin in there.
It doesn't have the pumpkin.
And
damn it!
Anyone
how can it be Halloween without
anyone
pumpkin?
who's been listening to these podcasts knows that, you know,
they have a pumpkin.
You lose me once you don't put a pumpkin in there.
So just picking up with the story. So like the next 15 years, we see Myers continue making these masks, not really speaking to anyone. Loomis continuing to try and treat him. You know, he tends to move on with his life, and he eventually decides to close Michael's case. And this. Later, then Myers gets provoked by this guard, and Michael kills the sanitarium employees and escapes. And I should throw in there that one of the attendants is oh my god, my mind's just gone blank.
Machete. Machete. I was quite shocked to find who dies. Like, man. Machete. Like,
and there's a bit where he goes, "I've always been your friend, Michael.
Yeah,
I've always been nice to you."
So that's 2 Spy Kids cast members.
Yeah. What's going on there?
Onto something here.
So Myers, he escapes. He kills a truck driver for his clothes. I'm thinking of Terminator there with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
And then he makes his way back to Haddonfield. On Halloween, Michael arrives at his now abandoned childhood home, where he recovers the kitchen knife and Halloween mask he stored under the floorboards the night he killed his sister. Meanwhile, Laurie Strode. We finally meet Laurie Strode.
Laurie Strode,
played by Scout Taylor Compton.
For some reason, all these girls seem older than they should be.
And we'll get because one of them is her friend Annie Brackett, who is played by Danielle Harris. Avid listeners will know that she is the girl from Halloween 4 and 5. Who
is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So she's she played Laurie Strode's daughter effectively.
Well, this timeline's just confusing the hell out of me.
So I think that was Rob Zombie's way of nodding to the original by having, or like the franchise, I should say, by having her come in to play the role. Annie Brackett.
Yeah.
And then we have Linda Van der Klook. I'm going to say played by Christina Klebe. As they're preparing for Halloween. Throughout the day, we see Laurie witness Michael watching her from a distance, and that night she goes to babysit Tommy Doyle. So far, so based on the original. At Michael's childhood home, Linda meets up with her boyfriend Bob Sims, and then Michael murders them. Then he heads over to the Strode home, where he murders Laurie's parents, Mason, and Cynthia, played by Dee Wallace, who people might know as The Howling, the mum in E.T. And various other kind of horror traits. She's basically like, the more you look into her career, the more, is there anyone more scream queen than Dee Wallace?
Yeah.
Like, she has been in a lot of horror
I think
flicks.
some people, might just look at her as the E.T. mum. But it's, if you look a bit deeper, you can see.
Yeah, man.
She's cropped up quite a bit in the stuff we've talked about.
A lot of Stephen King stuff, like Cujo she was in. You know, there's a lot of stuff. And more recently, she's in a film that's called Red Christmas that's coming out, which is directed by an Australian guy. So,
so you think there's a case to be made that she might just have Jamie Lee Curtis beat in the Scream Queen category?
She may. Because even The Frighteners, Peter Jackson film, she plays the one of the villains in that.
Good underrated film, that one.
Yeah, I love that film. So Myers kills them anyway.
Bit of Clockwork Orange there.
Yeah. Loomis has been alerted to Michael's escape, and he comes to Haddonfield looking for Michael. After obtaining a handgun, Loomis, which is quite a funny scene where he goes into the to buy the gun and off,
Oh, yeah. It's just a typical gun store owner, isn't it? Yeah, it'll do the job, but if you really want to take his face off, you want this. That's verbatim.
That is.
Yep.
Spot on. It's almost like he was here in the room with us there, Ben.
Gun store owner, number one.
So then Loomis then attempts to warn Annie's father, Sheriff Lee Brackett, played by Brad Dourif. Yeah.
Love Brad Dourif.
From Child's Play and Lord of the Rings, plus countless other films that you could throw into the mix. And he's telling him that Michael's returned to Haddonfield. Loomis and Brackett then head to Strode's home, with Brackett explaining along the way that Laurie is actually Angel Myers. So this is where we already know that from the Halloween backstory from the franchise, but this is them kind of just very openly telling us about it. Meanwhile, Annie convinces Laurie to babysit Lindsay Wallace, a girl Annie is supposed to be watching, so that she can have sex with her boyfriend Paul. Annie and Paul return to the Wallace home. During sex, Michael kills Paul and attacks Annie. Bringing Lindsay home, Laurie finds Annie on the floor, badly hurt but still alive, and calls the police. She is then attacked by Michael, who chases her back to the Doyle home. Are you with me? Loomis then, this is a way, like, so the original one, like, there wasn't all this drawn out kind of, like, attack and then move to another place and then attack someone.
It covers a little bit of the same beats, but
it's just a bit more drawn out process. Anyway, so meanwhile, Michael then kidnaps Laurie and takes her back to his home that he grew up in, and he approaches Laurie and tries to show her that she is his sister, presenting a picture of them with their mother. So a bit of a trying to connect moment, a bit odd. Anyway, unable to understand, Laurie stabs Michael with his own knife before escaping the house. Michael chases her, but Loomis intervenes and shoots him. Recovering, Michael recaptures Laurie. This is what I mean. It's like drawn out process. So Michael then recaptures Laurie before she can leave and heads back to the house. Loomis tries to reason with Michael, but instead Michael squeezes Loomis's skull with his bare hands, incapacitating him. Laurie takes Loomis's gun and runs upstairs. Never run upstairs. But she is chased again by Michael, who, after cornering her on a balcony, charges her head on, knocking them both over the railing. Laurie comes to and she's on top of an unconscious Michael. She then aims Loomis's gun at his face. She fires just as Michael awakes.
Yeah, she gets a few blank shots off first.
Yeah. So that's how it ends.
Yep.
The film. So
or does it?
Does it? But does it? That's true.
No, it does.
We know. No, it does. But does it? So to wrap up, I've got 3 questions for you. Choices on Michael Myers as a whole. Do you think it worked or not? Second one, Dr. Sam Loomis, Malcolm McDowell, the choice made with him, and did he have as an equally as impactful as Donald Pleasance was in that role? And the last one is, again, I'm talking about very much character based. Laurie Strode, played by Taylor Compton. What did you think? Scout Taylor Compton, is that right? What do you think about her? So the characters, how did they differ to you? Did it work or not on all 3 of those?
Well, on all 3, probably no on all 3 counts, but to similar degrees. Like, I think the Michael Myers thing is probably the biggest. Like, people would be like diehard fans, I'm sure a lot of them are outraged when they watch something like this and see how much she's demystified. But it's more for me. It's seeing the face as much as we see the face.
Yeah. That's true.
I don't mind that because he's obviously a big brute of a guy in this.
Yes.
Like he's much taller.
Yeah.
But I don't like that he's like makes a few audible groans and noises in this as well. Like that's another thing that didn't feel true to the character.
No, that's right. So I'm just to jump in here. So he's played by Tyler Mane. Is the actor that plays.
Is the dude like a wrestler or something?
I don't know his background, but you'd think he is.
Yeah. No, he just you see far too much of him. I think we've always said that the key to doing Michael Myers right is to show fleeting glimpses of him here and there. You know, they do it occasionally. Like that scene where he's first following Laurie is very, very similar to like that's probably the most un-Rob Zombie scene in the whole film. Like it almost looks like shot for shot remake of the same autumn leaf covered street from the original film.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But there's a few shots where it's like Michael's there 1 second and there's a clever little like pan past a tree and he's gone the next.
Yes.
Like that's the Michael.
Yeah, there's nice. Yeah, there are some nice.
That's the Michael Myers that we know and love. When he's there and gone the next second, and but you've got too much time to really get comfortable with him just there. And then towards the end of the film, he's just it's the Terminator basically.
Yeah.
Just turns into the Terminator.
Yeah.
But I would say that I didn't mind Malcolm McDowell in this role. I actually think that's not bad casting.
No.
But he doesn't have he doesn't sell those big like monologues, does he?
Nah.
Not in the same way that Pleasance did.
There was a certain eccentricity to Pleasance's performances across his career, but notably as Sam Loomis as well, that kind of worked, whereas McDowell was a very different actor. He has his own kind of eccentricism, if that is a word. But it just doesn't kind of work as well.
He's kind of like sleepwalking a little bit through the role, a little bit. But I don't think it's on paper that's good casting. I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Not just because of the fact that he's English as well.
Yep.
But not quite as bad as Michael, but less so is the Jamie Lee Curtis comparison is impossible not to make.
Yeah. I think the problem with this, because I seem to remember like when I first watched the movie, and obviously I brought myself around to watching it again for the podcast, but I seem to remember going, I thought I didn't mind her as Laurie Strode, but when I rewatched it, I was like, that's really terrible.
Yeah.
And particularly where it goes in the next movie as well. But it's weird.
Way too much screaming at the end as well.
Yeah, and like
she goes into scream mode.
Her character, and I think part of the problem is that we spent so much time, as I said, like encamped in the Michael Myers domain.
Yeah.
Of his character, that not enough tension's spent on Laurie at all. So by the time we get to meet her, you don't really care. Like,
but is she an updated version of Laurie Strode? Like, do you actually think that she's? Was this him? Was his in 2007? Was this him trying to make like a modernized?
Well,
version?
you'd say yes, because in the original she's a virgin. She is, they explore the fact that she is trying to go out with this guy that she's kind of interested in, but a bit too shy. She's very bookish. You can see in the way she dresses that it's very kind of bookish look. Whereas here it's very different. She's got almost a bit of a punk edge to her. Again, she's a little bit.
She's still a little bit of a bookworm kind of.
She is, but she's clearly no virgin. Like she's like clearly a lot more savvy to her sex within it, So
but it's that's so over the top. Like when they're walking, like they're just really over the top with all that when they're talking about like when Michael's watching them. And they're poking fun at each other and like, oh, you want to fuck him? And it's very like, you get the feeling like Rob Zombie just doesn't do subtlety well. Especially in those early scenes where like there's just terrible dialogue when the father-in-law or the boyfriend of the mother is just like absolutely unleashing. And then Rob Zombie's wife, whatever her character's name is, like, she's just taking it, and like she's just not standing up to him at all. But I'm just like, Rob Zombie must hate women. Just the way that he writes.
You'd think that. But like, if you look at these other films, I would argue that. I don't like. There's some moments in there. He definitely objectifies women.
For sure.
In his stuff. But like.
But I mean, I understand. Like, it's quite, it's quite confronting. Like I think that some critics, probably the main reason why a lot of critics respond the way they do. Because some people just, they look at that and they go, oh, this is him speaking how he would speak.
Yeah.
But I think most of the characters that speak like that end up getting their comeuppance anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, just my point is, subtle isn't his way.
Particularly if you look at his canon of work, like, even like Lords of Salem's about witchcraft, essentially, and there's a lot of strong female characters in it, which is why I was like, it felt like it was maturing for me as a director, but it just was missing any story, it was quite aloof. And like, he's obviously interested in mysticism, like spirituality and stuff as well, like, sort of satanical kind of.
You'd be into some kinky shit.
Yeah, so there's stuff that's in there that comes through, and you can see that. And so my thing is, I find it hard to know where I sit with this, because I too found it confronting when I was watching it. But there are people that talk that way, like, you were saying that's how Zombie speaks, but there are generally people that swear to the cows come home and talk that way. Like, I'm trying to think of how to say this politely, but I did work in a pub when I was growing up, right? And in Kent, and there are some very colourful characters that you would meet, and they were very kind of the language they would use is colourful too. And so I just kind of found myself slipping into that and going, well, like, is it a fair assumption to attack somebody because of the choice of language or the way they speak, because it alienates us, when it is probably it's a fair representation of the setting in which he has placed the movie.
Yeah, and like Michael's obviously from a pretty like poor background, and that's the kind of environment that he's grown up in.
Yeah. So this is where I struggle with it, because, as I said, I found it confronting, but then I don't know if I can really out and out say that damns the film, because if he's going for that kind of style and basing it, like, for me, I like writing. That's something I'm passionate about, and if you're tapping into that kind of zeitgeist or that kind of, as I say, that kind of culture, then you need to be reflective of that. So I don't know. I don't feel it's a fair assassination of his writing to kind of go down that line, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think, but that is probably one criticism that gets levelled at him, and people just think
for sure.
Yeah, because he goes for the obvious. He turns it up to 11.
Yeah,
all
through. It goes Spinal Tap on us. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. Let's. I think that kind of wraps up Halloween. Let's look at Halloween 2, because believe it or not, he does get invited back to do the sequel for this.
I guess they knew the first one would be a sure thing.
Yeah,
which it was, because of the cachet of the name itself.
Yeah.
And if anything, and that's the reason why I watch these films, is just out of curiosity. Doesn't matter how many of these bad remakes they do.
Yeah.
Like, you still want to see how they kind of handle it, and
you do. It's the same with like Rings is an example of a film that came out. Was that last year? Which was trying to reinvent that wheel again. And
New Blair Witch,
which and we're kind of naming ones that haven't done too well. But Annabelle Creation, which just came out fairly recently, I think you can safely say is a vast improvement on the original. And one of those rare cases where the sequel is better than the first one.
Yeah, but that's different because it's not, it's not revisiting like years and years later. Like, that's still a current.
It's an origin one again, so it's going back to the beginning of how Annabelle came to be.
It's an origin of an origin.
Yeah.
It's
so it's an interesting one. So and arguably the Ouija Origin of Evil, which was Mike Flanagan's film, which was again a prequel to the original, was better than the original. There was this interesting kind of thing where a lot of to name Blair Witch as well, a lot of kind of current of the mumblegore movement directors were kind of going into trying and reinvent or create franchises out of poor films, like poor horror films, and it's like an interesting choice to do that. Why do that as a filmmaker? But yeah, it was interesting from my point of view. So Halloween 2, as I said, came out 2 years after Halloween. And I'm calling this spiritualizing Michael Myers and demonizing Sam Loomis. Because I think they're the two core areas that happens within this film.
That should be the subtitle. The studios love their long titles these days.
They do.
Like Halloween 2, spiritualizing Michael Myers.
And demonising Sam Loomis. So let's go through the plot line of this one. So, and obviously interject if you've got any kind of comments through this. But we have a flashback just so we can have Sherry Moon Zombie in it again.
Yep. She was so great the first time.
Yeah, Deborah Myers. She visits her son, a young Michael Myers, this time played by Chase Wright Vanek, different actor.
Just no continuity with your actors, man.
That's it. At the Smiths Grove Sanatorium, she gives him a white horse statuette as a gift, while Myers says it reminds him of a dream he had of Deborah's ghost telling him she was going to bring him home. So this is what I mean, like, so this is why I mention this is the spiritualization of Myers. And I feel like this arcs sort of to the plot line or where the franchise was going in 4, 5 and 6, where it was starting to tap into how Myers was controlled by a cult. And it's kind of like there's something else that is within Michael Myers that is pushing him forward. So it's not just motivation.
And explaining his immortality.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I feel like, so obviously the first movie, zombie movie that he produced and directed tapped into the more kind of slasher area, whereas this one is like, where else is he going to go with that? But this is the other area that was explored within the franchise. So I kind of get it from a logical point of view that that's what you would do. So 1 year after we pick up the film, 1 year after the events of the first film, Laurie Strode, played by Scout Taylor Compton again, is now living with the Bracketts. Michael has been missing since last Halloween and is presumed dead, while Laurie keeps having these reoccurring nightmares about the event. Meanwhile, Michael's psychiatrist, Dr. Sam Loomis, Malcolm McDowell coming back again, has chosen to turn the event into an opportunity to write another book. Elsewhere, Michael, who is still alive, has been having visions of Deborah's ghost and a younger version of himself who instructs him that it is time to bring Laurie home, so he sets off back to Haddonfield. So he's basically kind of been
walking through fields for an hour.
For an hour. Yeah, it takes him a while, doesn't it? As Michael travels to Haddonfield, Laurie begins to have more of these hallucinations. Again, this arcs back to Halloween 4 or 5. 5, with this sister in that, played by Danielle Harris.
Yep.
Where she's starting to have these kind of psychic connections with her brother Michael as he's coming to hunt down and kill her again.
Yeah.
So there is feeling like Zombie is tapping into, as I said, the franchise,
and the more about the what's going on inside her head kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah.
The internal versus the external.
Exactly. So Loomis at the time is also going on tour to promote his new book, only to be criticised by the public, who blame him for Michael's actions and for exploiting the deaths of Michael's victims. When Loomis' book is released, Laurie discovers that she is really Angel Myers. So she didn't know this up till then, still secret to her, so she finds out that she's the sister. And she kind of has a bit of a flip-out moment. She goes to a party with May and Harley, two of her friends, to escape how she is feeling. Michael appears and kills Harley, then goes to the Brackett house and fatally wounds Annie Brackett. So Annie Brackett, played by Danielle Harris, actually survived the original film, the original Halloween film by Rob Zombie, whereas in the original Halloween film by John Carpenter, she was killed off.
That's right.
So she's brought back only to get really brutally fucked up and killed in the bathroom, and there's a lot of fucking blood.
A lot of blood. Brad Dourif.
Yeah, Brad Dourif comes back.
His Oscar scene that he just never got nominated.
No, I don't know why.
He put everything into that scene too.
You can see it. And Laurie and Maya arrive, and then Michael kills Maya, and then comes after Laurie again, who manages to escape. Laurie flags down a car, but then Michael kills the driver, flips the car over, with Laurie still inside it.
Sheer fucking brute force.
Yeah. Also, I should add to this, we were talking earlier, so Tyler Mane was a professional wrestler.
Oh, well, I believe that. You flip a car easy.
Flip a car, that's it. And then he takes the unconscious Laurie to an abandoned shed. The police discover Michael's location, surround the shed.
GPS or what?
GPS, yeah, man. He had a homing
ankle
beacon,
bracelet.
Ankle bracelet.
That's very effective.
Yeah,
they're pretty fucking good when they need to be.
Yeah,
they couldn't show up in time in the first film.
No.
You know.
It's like Sheriff Brackett. It's like, I know where he is. Follow me.
Also very impressive on his part that he can suck up all the sorrow of just losing his daughter full of blood to go and lead this siege to this
That
shed.
so totally would never happen.
Yeah. If I know Brad Dourif, like I know Brad Dourif.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can make it.
Let the man grieve.
That's it. But he's a testament to what a sheriff should be. All about the job.
So noble. The opposite of Wormtongue.
So they exactly. So they eventually find
Wormtail or Wormtongue?
Wormtongue.
Wormtongue. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Harry Potter.
So they eventually find where Myers is, and Loomis arrives because he's trying to make up for the fact that he's been so badly labelled in the public eye. So it's almost like he goes on a bit of a redemption mission.
This is one of the great redemptions in Hollywood, I think.
So he arrives on the scene and he goes inside to try and reason with Michael without the police wanting him to go in. He sneaks in. Inside he finds Laurie, who is hallucinating a younger Michael holding her down, and tries telling her
tripping balls
that no one is restraining her. Just then, Deborah instructs the older Michael that it is time to go home. Michael grabs Loomis and kills him. Shock, man.
He had a good run.
He did have a good run. And then stepping in front of a window while holding Loomis's body, Michael is shot twice by Annie's father, Sheriff Lee Brackett, and he falls into some spikes of some farming equipment that happens to be lying around. And apparently released from her visions, Laurie walks over and tells Michael she loves him, and then stabs him repeatedly. The shed door opens and Laurie walks out, wearing Michael's mask. Later, Laurie sits in isolation in a psychiatric ward, grinning at a vision of Deborah. Close film. So there's bits in that end as well where she puts on the mask. Again, feels like a nod to Halloween, the end of Halloween 4. Where
would he really be referencing those sequels though? Like,
I think so. Why not?
If he is a fan, is he like a fan of all of those films, or is he? I mean, obviously not. If you're going to try, there's too many little things that crop up here and there. So he's obviously trying to recognise in some way everything that's come after.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it is on purpose. Like, you're going to go to the source material. How much? I mean, if I do get the impression that Zombie is a huge fan of the horror film genre. Like, you see, like, there are in 31, there's a really fucked up, twisted, sadomasochistic character who is butt fucking a prostitute whilst he is watching Nosferatu.
Yeah. And there's stuff in here as well. There's films within films.
Yeah, there's
like
so
in the
many.
I think when Ronnie's getting murdered, like in the first film, the asshole boyfriend of the mother. There's something playing on the television in that scene as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is there is again nods to like the thing. Is it the Thing from Another World and stuff like that? So like, because that's what was on when in Carpenter's one. And of course he went on to make The Thing. As well. So like, there's definitely I feel like there is definite nods going on left, right, and centre. Whether people pick that on that, I don't know.
Lee Marvin impersonations from Brad Dourif as well.
That's it.
Not necessarily inside the horror genre, but
no, that's it.
You could
branch
just
it
be
outwards.
A fan of film in general.
So, what are your final thoughts though on Halloween 2 as a film? Like, obviously from a wider perspective, it got more panned than its first attempt. Sure. Are you in line with that thinking? Do you think it needs to be damned more than it has been?
Is that possible? It's it's a mess, I reckon.
Yeah.
The first 25 minutes of this movie is a dream, right? The whole thing's a dream. Did it actually happen or not? Like, did she ever get chased out of the hospital by Myers and get almost saved by a guy called Buddy, the security guard, who ends up being like a little doll that she
that's right,
lies in bed with?
Yeah.
I was just like, fuck, surely this can't be a dream. And then she wakes up and it's like, was that a flashback?
Yeah, there's a
dream?
lot of that going on, isn't there?
Or is it the flash forward? You know, because she does end up in a psychiatric ward.
But I thought that she's dead though, right?
I thought that
that's
too.
her dead.
Yeah, because she gets gunned down, doesn't she?
Yeah, no psych ward. That's purgatory or heaven.
I
hell.
agree. Yeah, and particularly because of the vision of the mum coming up, it's like it's Laurie Strode's spirit has been taken over.
And so are we kind of like, I know I'm flitting back and forth, but let's just like talk about that ending. Like,
yeah,
is that meant to be Michael's motive the whole time, was sort of to make sure the whole family could be together again? By killing her, it means that, and him dying, that means they can all be together again.
All right, so let's look at this from Zombies canon of work, because I think that's the only way I can answer that. Because if you look at The House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, the family do stick together through thick and thin, even through their love-hate relationship that they come through, or they go through. And in 31, that just came out too, they are a travelling entertainment family. They're not related, blood related, but they're a family, as in a working family that stick together. So there is definitely something about that in Zombies' work. So I had never thought of that before until you mentioned it, but that would resonate with me, that probably is a choice.
So why is Michael represented by a child, like his child version? Is this an Anakin Skywalker situation where it's like, that was the last time he was good?
He was pure.
So if he was a hologram at the end of the film standing alongside Yoda, like that would be like young Michael. Yeah. Would be digitally added later on by George Lucas.
Yeah. And hopefully without Hayden Christensen.
Yeah.
Inside it. Like, I think maybe that's what he's going for. Like, I think it is this. I mean, everything's white and pristine. Like, Deborah Myers is dressed in white as well. So she does come across as this angelic figure. The horse unicorn thing or whatever it is white as well. So there is this wanting to find that innocence and purity again that was lost at some point. And I think
but her smiling creepily doesn't really give you that.
No, it doesn't.
That's just him just being like, oh, it'd be a really fucked up ending if she looked creepily.
Yeah.
But I guess, does he want you to think that? Does he want you to go like, is she dead? Is she in a psych ward? Who knows?
Yeah.
But was he intending for this to go on?
Like, I think it's hard to know, isn't it? Because it's like he has killed the franchise off by doing it too. Do you know what I mean? Like, or at least killed off the Laurie Strode part of that canon.
Yeah.
Let's face it, Myers always tends to come back. So
he definitely took it. You give him credit for taking it in a different direction, because it starts out. I thought it was going to be exactly the same. In the same way the first one was a retread of Halloween, this is going to be Halloween 2. It picks up the moment one lit finishes. Yeah. Goes to the hospital.
Yes.
The Halloween 2 spends most of the film at the hospital.
That's right. Yeah,
Whereas
that's
this
right.
movie, it's done in Michael's there within 10 minutes or so, and it's all wrapped up within that dream sequence.
Now I will just deviate slightly for a second, because I know from previous podcast discussions on the Halloween movies that you were you had a keen eye on Michael Myers' movements. And the time span that it would take for him to get to one place and another. Do you feel like that was replicated in these two movies at all?
Well, considering he walked across the countryside just on fucking foot.
Yeah.
Did it really take him? Are we to believe that the time that's passed between number 1 and number 2?
Yeah.
He's just been walking around
in a
aimlessly,
field. Or maybe.
What was he doing?
I don't know.
Was he resurrected by did he go off and spend some time with a cult or something, or was he which film was it where he was kind of brought back to life? Someone cared for him and kind of
in the Myers canon.
Yeah,
that was the 6th one, wasn't it? Wasn't that the 6th one? Because that's
Resurrection.
That's the whole. Oh, Resurrection was he? That's the one in the house, wasn't it?
Someone had a part in bringing him back to health, or. At some point.
I thought that was the 6th one where he's where it was you find out that there was the doctor that was working there, and
it's 2 years, right?
Yeah,
from the first one to this one.
Yeah.
So he's presumably Laurie's. They said they didn't find a body, but she fucking shot his face in.
Yeah.
We could hear the sirens in the background. So what's happened in that little like space of time?
That's magic. Yeah. There should be.
That's the big unanswered question for me. It's just like the logic gap is like when that dream sequence finishes, I'm just sitting there going, whoa, hang on a sec, let's just freeze this. But they never get to it, and that...
I don't think they do that in... again, that's a very similar thing that he does between House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, because there's a massive gap between...
Yeah.
Like, the timeline. Like, all of a sudden, the police are after them, and...
What was he doing for 2 years? Was he just off training, throwing
I think
machetes at a picture of Laurie?
There needs to be a short featurette called Finding Michael Myers.
Let's do
it'd be like Finding Forrester.
Well, no, the trend now is to make little short prologues, like Alien Covenant.
Like Alien Covenant.
Yeah, or like the new Blade Runner one that's come out. So you would need a bridging film, like a graphic novel of some kind.
Yeah, I think
we don't.
We don't.
No, we don't.
Don't want to go there. Rob Zombie could go there if he wanted.
Yeah. You don't win over an audience by pulling the rug out from under them like that.
That's it.
Like, what's the point of having leading the film with that kind of a scene, and then...
I know, it's very... There's some odd choices made, I have to admit. And just going back to what you said, I do take my hat off to him in trying something new, because you said that. And I think you've got to do something. You've got to throw something into the mix.
But showing Michael in full, like, police spotlight... full face in that death scene is not the way to go about it.
No, it's like at least with the bridging gap between Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection. Because he gets decapitated as the end of H2O, and then we find out that it wasn't him; it was the security guard. So at least there was a way.
I forgot about that.
Making up.
That's one of the great let's sweep this under the rug kind of
so insane. So for me that was at least they worked a way back.
This is very obscure, but I remember that show Sliders.
Yes,
Jerry O'Connell and his brother. There was this. They went from one season to the next, and the O'Connell brothers hadn't signed up, obviously. So the episode started out with the two of the Sliders running to get to the portal or whatever, and then Jerry O'Connell and his brother are back here somewhere, but it's obviously stand-ins or stunt doubles, and they just had their heads down, dodging bullets and stuff. They just didn't show their faces at all, and that was their way around. So that was the last time you saw that. Those characters didn't get a send-off because they just didn't sign up for a new season.
Right. Okay.
And it's just the laziest kind of excuse. But hats off to them. The Halloween making up that kind of excuse for chopping someone's head off.
Yeah, it's how do you bring back somebody from the dead? You don't.
It's probably the first time anyone's ever brought up Sliders on this podcast. I think.
I know. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then but there was a lot of issues around that too, because the guy that was in Indiana Jones.
We're talking Sliders.
Yeah.
John Rhys Davies.
Thank you. Mine had gone blank. Had outwardly kind of libelled the writers of that, and that's why his character got written out, because I
think everyone got written out on that show.
He basically kind of slagged off the writing or something.
I don't think there was anyone left by the end.
No, there's no original players at all. All right. So I'm going to quickly go through the kill count, because we've been doing that from the previous Halloween films. So Halloween, the first one from Zombie, kill count was 20.
Yeah.
Go through them. Wesley Rhodes, bludgeoned with a tree branch. Ronnie White, throat slit with a butcher knife. Steve Haley, bludgeoned with an aluminium baseball bat. Judith Myers, stabbed multiple times with a butcher knife. Nurse Wynn, stabbed in the throat with a fork. Deborah Myers shoots herself in the mouth with a handgun. Jack Kendall, head bashed against the wall multiple times, featured in the unrated cut of the movie. Noel Kluges, as above. Zach Garrett, bludgeoned with chains. Larry Redgrave, head bludgeoned against the wall multiple times. Stan Payne, shot in the stomach with a shotgun. Paddy Frost, throat ripped out. Gloria, throat ripped out. This was an unseen kill. Ismael Cruz, head shoved in water, almost chokes, and then Michael smashes a TV on his head. Joe Grizzly, beaten and knifed in the stomach. Bob Sims, pinned to the wall with a butcher knife. Linda Vanderclock, strangled. Mason Strode, throat slit with a butcher knife. Cynthia Strode, neck snapped. Paul Friedman, knifed in stomach with a butcher knife. Officer Lowry, knifed in the back with a butcher knife. Deputy Charles, knifed in the chest with a butcher knife.
Cop it.
Boom. Halloween 2, kill count 20 again.
Do you reckon he's done this on purpose? He's I want to just keep my kill count like exactly the same this time around. I actually think I watched the unrated version, uncut version.
Oh, so you remember some of those?
So I would have,
Yeah, probably did, man. So let's go through the kill count of Halloween 2. We have Coroner Hooks killed in a car crash. Gary Scott decapitated with a glass shard. Nurse Octavia Daniels stabbed repeatedly with a butcher knife.
Can we just stop there? Octavia, being played by Octavia Spencer.
Yes.
So just haven't even bothered to like
change the name. Why?
Yeah.
Why would you? Why would you?
Yeah. I wonder if it was scripted that way.
If it was written by one of our podcast colleagues, Anthony Yee, he just names people he knows.
Yeah. Oscar nominee Octavia Spencer is in this film.
That's it. And then we have
also.
Oh, she's really good in this though. I seem to remember. I like that bit.
Also, Chris. The movie's fucking weird. Chris Hardwick and Weird Al Yankovic are in this film.
That's right.
On a talk show.
That's right. I forgot about that.
That just completely took me out of the movie.
Okay, so, and then kill 4 was Nurse, eyes gouged out, Buddy axed in the back, Floyd impaled on deer antlers, Sherman Benny stabbed with a butcher knife, Jasleen Benny stabbed with a butcher knife, Howard Boggs face bashed in, Lou Martini arm broken, head bashed against the wall, Misty Dawn bashed against the wall, Wolfie stabbed in the back with a butcher knife, Harley David strangled, Deputy Andy Neal neck snapped, Annie Brackett stabbed with a butcher knife and beaten, Maya Rockwell stabbed in the stomach with a butcher knife, Bex thrown through a car window, Dr. Sam Loomis knifed in the stomach with a butcher knife, Michael Myers shot by police, Laurie Strode shot by police. Done.
The bloodletting. It's never ending.
No, that's it.
It's pretty frequent in this one.
It is. There's a lot. And I think from memory, I'll have to double check all this stuff, but I think these are the higher kill counts as well. I don't think throughout the Halloween franchise there has any been this higher kill rate.
Yeah, I don't think 4, 5, 6 were getting pretty high up there.
Yeah. I think they were about 17.
But
I want to say
that's yet another reason. You got to be economical with your kills, and there is just too many. The impact just gets lost.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's look at the franchise as a whole. Where do these Rob Zombie films sit in the franchise canon?
In the pantheon of cinema.
Yeah, let's not go there.
I think
just purely look at the franchise. Where do you think they sit?
Yeah, I'd say that they're right down the bottom. I think the second one is probably like right at the bottom of the pile with Halloween 6.
Yeah. Or Resurrection was a bit shitty.
No, sorry, Resurrection. Yeah, Halloween 2 and Resurrection down the bottom.
I agree.
Halloween 1 only because the plot is a little cleaner, and it doesn't have the fucking 25-minute dream thing, and it shows a bit. Even though it shows more of Michael, this shows way too much of Michael. So Halloween is slightly better than Halloween 2. I think 4, 5 it gets very muddied, like when you talk about 4, 5, 6. And,
I agree.
I do think that Halloween this Halloween 2 and Resurrection are like the absolute worst.
Yes,
but you're talking about degrees of shitness here.
Yes,
it's like it makes this version of Halloween 2 makes Carpenter. I know Carpenter didn't direct it, but the original Halloween 2 just like The Godfather Part 2 by comparison.
Yeah, it does too. Hey, because I remember we were talking about Halloween 2, and it weirdly is still one of the stronger of the sequels.
Yeah, it is.
In
terms of horror sequels, like that exist. It's actually one of the stronger sequels.
It is.
And it's like quite an anomaly because it does pick up the night of the same Halloween night or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few films that actually does that.
Yeah.
But this took things in a different direction, and it was not the right direction.
No, I agree. I need to echo that. I feel that both Halloween 2, Rob Zombie flick, and Halloween Resurrection are at the bottom of that pile. So I completely concur with you there. My question to you is where does Halloween Season of the Witch fit in the canon? Seeing as I think we said on record that it's so not a Halloween film because it doesn't feature Myers and stuff. But in comparison, that movie, considering it doesn't have Myers, where do these two Rob Zombie films, well, more so the first Rob Zombie film, where does that sit in comparison next to Halloween Season of the Witch?
Season of the Witch is it's a strange one because as you said, it doesn't actually feature Myers. But I think at the time when I saw that, there were things about it that I liked.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like as a self-contained thing, it's weird like ranking it because it's not.
Yeah, I know because it's not. It's so not.
I think I
part
said
of
at the time it's just like
that's right.
An episode of Goosebumps.
Yeah,
like for adults.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, that's
or
right.
like a Twilight Zone kind of story.
Very Twilight Zone. Yeah.
Or Black Mirror if it was updated with technology nowadays.
Sure, yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah, you can see that. Particularly Black Mirror always picks up with a new.
But I think once you get past like Halloween 2, everything else is just like gets very muddy. You know, the original Halloween 2. I think to rank it, I think everyone probably ranks it similarly, right? Like
I think so. Yeah,
they're all blocked together. There's like 3 tiers almost, and
I think
there's 4.
I mean, that's how we've broken it up too. I mean, like we had Halloween and Halloween 2, and we did them as separate podcasts. Yeah. But then we did Halloween Season of the Witch, which is the distant cousin of the franchise.
Yeah.
And then we grouped 4, 5, and 6 together because that's the one that keeps the Jamie Lloyd movies together.
Yeah.
And her character arc, even though she's very minor in the 6th one. And then I guess you get the Resurrection. Oh no, the Resurrection one's in that one, isn't it? Is that right? No. Yeah. Then you get
H2O.
H2O and Resurrection, which we call the Return of Laurie Strode, because that was her character coming back. And then we get the zombie. So I think there's about four different. If you're going to break them out, there are 4 different.
Well, I guess,
areas.
but Resurrection and this Rob Zombie stuff, they were like very conscious efforts to like modernize. Franchise.
Yeah, Resurrection was trying to do the whole Big Brother thing, using technology and people kind of watching
the real world, or
yeah. But which Craven did a lot smarter when in Scream, when you have what's his name's character
in the second one.
Yeah, when they're out, when you have in the first film, is it the first film where we have Courtney Cox and Neve Campbell in the van watching the hooked up camera of the guy.
Yeah, that was quite creepy. Yeah.
And that's done in a way like you could see if they did something on a similar kind of vein, that would have been kind of interesting because they tried to tap into that.
But stretching it out to a whole film is Did we actually do that? Did we talk about that film?
Yeah, we did, man.
That's how much I've just erased it from.
It's been
from
a while.
My memory.
It has been a while. We did talk about it because we talked about the Laurie Strode bit essentially. Although Laurie Strode in that gets killed off at the beginning, like we then kind of follow.
I just remember Tyra Banks. That's all I remember.
Tyra Banks and Katie Sackhoff.
Yeah,
isn't it? And that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
So
let's never speak of it again.
No, let's not. So, okay, so we're kind of saying that it was a bit of a failed attempt, essentially. And there are essence of where you can kind of get where Zombie was going with it, and there's some bits that work in shades.
Yeah, I think, strangely enough, like, both of these films, you can actually see on paper that in a better director's hands they could have worked. But more than anything, it's like the structural choices he made that kind of threw me off. With the whole giving the origin in the first film like a good hour, and in this one spending too much time at the start of the film like pretending like that never happened. Yeah, like structurally, I just think it's wrong.
Yeah.
But then I think just the biggest failure on page 1 is Michael being demystified way too much.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think you're always going to struggle from there on in.
All the sequels made that same mistake.
Oh, they did. Every single one of them. It's like, it was a massive fad, wasn't it? They were like, let's talk about where they came from.
And I think McBride, Danny McBride, like knows that is the key. He just wants to make it, Michael Myers like scary again. That's actually the good thing about this is that Danny McBride's not going to be in this film. He's purely there to just see it through. And he wants it to be the best film it can be. So I think he knows if he put himself in the film, straight away.
I'm sure he might be in it, but just as a cameo or something.
I think, could be like just walking around in Halloween costume or something.
Yeah, I think that would work. But yeah, I get it. Cool. All right. Well, I think that might conclude our special podcast recording of Halloween, the Rob Zombie movies. Unless you anything else you want to add to the grand scheme of things, there, Ben.
No, nothing profound from me. I'm just gonna try and erase this memory, like apparently I did with Halloween Resurrection.
Yeah. Well, it worked. Clearly, it clearly worked. Whatever you're doing, it worked.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks again for your time, Ben. And as always, I'm your humble host, Paul Farrell. Until next time, goodbye.
Well, not till next time for me. Very sad.
Oh, he had to go there.
Oh shit!
Oh, man.
You didn't have to say it, bro.
Yeah. Sorry, we might resurrect you. Bring you back from the dead. Hey, you might feature, just maybe not in podcast form.
Version 2.0.
Always a pleasure hanging out with you.
You too, Paul.
And talking films.
And that's been The Surgeons.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.